It hurts.
I know. I'm here.
Don't leave me.
Never, I promise.
The wind rolled low across the plains like a tired animal dragging its bones home. It carried dust, sorrow, and the smell of distant rain that would never reach the cracked earth of Dry Creek Ranch. Elias Ward had lived his life on that land, born there, buried his parents there, and learned early that hope was something you fed slowly, like a stubborn fire in winter. Elias wasn't a man of many words. His voice was rough like barbed wire, his hands scarred from years of rope burns and broken fences. He trusted horses more than men, storms more than promises. But loneliness was a different kind of storm. It crept into the cracks of his cabin walls at night and sat heavy in his chest until breathing hurt. So when he answered the ad in a newspaper from a town 3 states away, mail order bride seeking honest rancher, kind soul, new life, he felt foolish, but desperate men do foolish things. Her name was Clara Bell. She wrote letters in careful ink, each word trembling with hope. She spoke of sewing dresses, baking bread, wanting a home where laughter lived. Elias read her letters under lantern light, lips moving over each sentence like a prayer he wasn't sure God would hear. He never told anyone. When the stagecoach arrived carrying her trunk, the whole town watched from behind saloon windows. Elias stood stiff, hat in his hands. Clara stepped down, small, pale, eyes bright with fear and determination. She smiled at him like sunrise breaking through fog. That smile warmed something frozen in him. He promised her safety. He promised her kindness. And for 3 weeks, he kept that promise. Then came the night he found her in the barn. She was lying in the straw, dress torn, face bruised, breath shallow, a red ribbon tangled in her hair, and beside her a folded note pinned to her sleeve with a rusted nail. Elias's hands trembled as he opened it. "She belongs to us. You should have stayed alone." The lantern shook in his grip. The shadows danced like ghosts on the barn walls. Elias Ward had never been afraid of a man before, but that night fear became fury, and fury became a vow. By dawn, the ranch was silent except for Clara's fragile breathing and the slow creak of rocking boards in the wind. Elias sat beside her bed, a basin of cool water on his knees, wiping the dried blood from her cheek. She stirred once, whispering something he couldn't hear. He leaned closer. "Don't let them take me back." The words struck him harder than any bullet. Back. Not just a threat of past. Elias rode into town with the note clenched in his fist. The sheriff, Dalton Price, read it slowly, jaw tight. "Could be drifters," Dalton said. "Could be jealous fools. Could be trouble from where she came." "Where did she come from?" Elias asked quietly. Dalton hesitated. "You ever ask?" Elias hadn't. He'd been too grateful to question miracles. At the telegraph office, Elias sent a wire to the address Clara had given in her letters. Hours later, the reply came back like thunder in a clear sky. "Legels didi astiop no rukakod off, sestastopo roloti vestiup." Elias stared at the message until the letters blurred. If Clara Bell was dead, then who was the woman bleeding in his bed, and who wanted her back? That night, Elias cleaned his rifle. Not because he wanted revenge, because he understood something old cowboys learned young. When wolves circle your home, you don't wait for dawn. Clara woke near midnight. The storm had finally arrived, rain hammering the roof like fists. Lightning flashed through the cracks in the shutters, painting her face in ghost-white light. She saw Elias sitting beside her. "Did they hurt you?" she whispered. "No," he said. Her eyes filled with tears. "They always do." The truth came slowly, like thawing ice. Her real name was Marigold Hart. She'd been forced into a traveling ring of thieves who sold women into marriages, then blackmailed the husbands or dragged the brides back when richer targets appeared. She'd tried to escape before. They'd found her. The note wasn't just a threat, it was a claim. "They'll come again?" she said. "They always come." Elias stood jaw hard as stone. "Let them," he said. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains like a warning inside. Something else grew, something stronger than fear. A promise. Because Elias Ward had lived alone all his life. But now someone had tried to take what little love he had finally found. And cowboys don't forgive that kind of thing. Not ever. The prairie was quiet in the kind of way that makes a man uneasy. Elias Ward had grown up reading silence. He could tell when it was peaceful and when it was waiting. That morning, as the sky bruised purple over Dry Creek Ranch, he knew the difference. Something was coming. Inside the cabin, Marigold Heart slept restlessly beneath quilts stitched by Elias's mother years before. Fever burned through her. Every few minutes she whispered names he didn't recognize, towns he'd never heard of, prayers broken by fear. Elias sat at the table sharpening his knife. Slow strokes against stone, each scrape echoing like a clock counting down. He had questions. Too many. But questions didn't matter now. Protection did. He saddled his horse before sunrise and rode to town again. The streets were empty except for a lantern swinging outside the general store. Sheriff Dalton Price waited on the boardwalk, hat pulled low, a second man beside him. "Elias!" Dalton said. "This is Jonah Crow, Texas Ranger." Jonah Crow didn't look like the stories. No polished boots, no heroic grin. Just tired eyes and a scar cutting down his cheek like lightning frozen in flesh. "You married a ghost," Jonah said plainly. Elias Dillis didn't answer. Jonah handed him a paper, a sketch. 3 men, 1 woman, names scribbled beneath, Teacher and Sir E.W. "They move town to town," Jonah said. "Sell brides, rob ranchers, blackmail judges. Anyone fights back, they disappear." Elias's hands tightened. "You ever catch them?" he asked. Jonah shook his head. "Not yet." The word yet hung heavy between them. Then Jonah looked straight into Elias's eyes. "But they're coming here." Elias felt no fear, just certainty. "Good," he said. By afternoon the sky turned the color of old iron. Elias spent the day preparing without speaking. He boarded windows, hid ammunition beneath floorboards, set lanterns where shadows couldn't hide. Marigold watched him from the bed. "You don't have to do this," she said weakly. "You could ride away." "They only want me." Elias didn't stop working. "They touched you," he said quietly. "That makes it my business." She cried then, silent tears soaking into his mother's quilt. No one had ever fought for her before, not once. As night fell, Jonah Crow arrived with 2 more riders, May Carter, sharp-eyed and silent, and Ben Holloway, a giant of a man with hands like oak roots. Different names, different pasts, different scars. But they all knew evil when they saw it. They sat around Elias's table under lantern light while the wind screamed outside. May spoke first. "The Raven crew has 5 men now. Leader's named Silas Boone." Jonah nodded. "Cruel smart, patient." Elias looked up. "Where?" May pointed east. "Ridge Trail. They'll hit before dawn. They always do." The room went still. Elias poured whiskey into tin cups. No one toasted. No one smiled. They drank like soldiers already marching toward gunfire. Before bed, Elias stepped outside. The prairie stretched endless beneath cold stars. He thought of his father's grave, his mother's laugh, the life he'd lived alone. Then he thought of Marigold whispering, "Don't let them take me back." He touched the rifle on his shoulder and prayed without words. They came before dawn, hoofbeats like thunder rolling low across the land, 5 riders cutting through mist. Silas Boone rode in front, tall, calm, smiling like a man arriving at church. Elias watched from the barn loft, breath steady. Beside him, Jonah whispered, "Wait." Closer, closer. The first rider reached the gate when Elias fired. The shot split morning open. Cars exploded. Horses screamed. Men shouted. May's rifle cracked like lightning. Ben swung down with a raw fist-smashing bone. Silas Boone didn't panic. He just smiled wider. "Give her back," he shouted. "She belongs to us." Inside the cabin, Marigold heard his voice and froze in terror. Elias saw it in his mind, her fear, her shaking hands, her broken hope. Something inside him snapped. He leapt from the loft, landing hard, gun blazing. A rider fell. Another fled. Smoke swallowed the yard. Then Silas Boone raised his hand. "Stop," he called. The gunfire faded. Silence returned. Boone's eyes locked onto Elias. "You don't know what she did," Boone said calmly. "She stole from us, betrayed us, cost us everything." Elias's voice was quiet as death. "She ain't yours." Boone laughed softly. "She carries something we need. Something worth more than your ranch, your life, your little dream of love." Jonah stepped forward. "What is it?" Boone's smile faded. "A list," he said. The word hit like thunder. A list of names, Boone continued. Judges, generals, men who paid us to disappear people, to buy wives, to keep secrets buried. He pointed at the cabin. She wrote it down, and we're getting it back. Elias felt the world tilt. This wasn't just a gang. This was rot buried deep in the bones of the country. Boone tipped his hat. We'll be back tonight, he said softly, with more friends. Then he turned his horse and rode away, leaving silence, smoke, and a war no one in Dry Creek had ever imagined. Inside the cabin, Marigold clutched a hidden journal to her chest. Because the list was real, and it would change everything. The sky over Dry Creek burned red before the sun ever rose. Elias Ward stood at the ridge watching the horizon glow like a warning carved into the world. He knew fires. Prairie fires, cabin fires, the kind of fires that start by accident and the kind started by men. This one would be the second kind. Behind him, Jonah Crow checked his revolver. May Carter tightened the strap on her rifle. Ben Holloway paced like a caged bull, cracking his knuckles. Different names. Different lives, all drawn into the same storm. Inside the cabin, Marigold Hart sat at the table with shaking hands, the journal open before her. Ink lines scratched across the pages, names of men powerful enough to bury crimes and buy silence. Governors, bankers, judges, men with polished boots and clean reputations, men who paid the Raven crew to steal wives, to silence daughters, to erase people. Elias stepped inside and saw her tears falling onto the paper. You don't have to read them, he said gently. She shook her head. Someone has to know the truth. He knelt beside her. We'll get you to the Rangers. To court? Somewhere safe. She looked at him like a child asking if monsters were real. They'll burn the world before they let this out, she whispered. Elias didn't answer, because he knew she was right. That afternoon a stranger rode into town. His name was Sheriff Nathan Hale. Different sheriff, different badge, different eyes. Dalton Price had gone missing overnight. Nathan Hale wore Dalton's star pinned crooked on his vest. Said Dalton had ridden out on business, said everything was under control. Jonah Crow watched him leave and muttered, We've been betrayed. Because Nathan Hale's name was in Marigold's journal. Night fell heavy and silent. Too silent. No coyotes howled, no wind moved. Even the horses shifted nervously, sensing something humans couldn't. Then came the glow, torches in the distance. Dozens of riders cresting the ridge. The Raven crew had returned and they'd brought an army. Silas Boone rode at the front again, calm as a preacher walking to the pulpit. Beside him rode Sheriff Nathan Hale, smiling like a man already counting his reward. Elias stepped out of the cabin. Rifle in hand, behind him stood Jonah My Ben. Behind them stood Marigold, clutching the journal. Silas called out, Last chance, Cowboy. Give us the girl and the book. Elias shook his head. Silas sighed. Burn it down. Gunfire exploded. Flames leapt to the barn. Horses screamed. Smoke swallowed the stars. May shot 2 riders before they reached the fence. Ben dragged one man off his saddle and threw him into the dirt like broken wood. Jonah's revolver sang death in steady rhythm. But there were too many. Elias fought like a man defending more than land. He fought for the first laugh he'd heard in his cabin. The first warm meal shared across his table. The first time someone had called him by his name with kindness. He fought for love. Silas Boone rode straight toward him through fire and smoke. They faced each other in the yard. Boone smiled. You could have stayed alone. Elias answered, I was done being alone. They fired together. Boone's bullet grazed Elias's shoulder. Elias's shot tore Boone's hat away. Then Boone laughed, pulling another gun. Before he could fire, Marigold stepped forward. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. The journal's copied, she shouted. Sent to the Rangers, to newspapers, to judges who aren't afraid. Silas froze. For the first time, fear cracked his smile. Nathan Hale cursed. Kill them all! But it was too late. From the darkness beyond the ridge came new riders. Dozens. Texas Rangers. Jonah Crow's signal fire had been seen. The tide turned in thunder. The battle ended with dawn. Smoke drifted over the ruins of the barn. Bodies lay in the dust. The Raven crew lay broken, some dead, some captured. Silas Boone among them, bleeding but alive. Sheriff Nathan Hale tried to run. May Carter shot the gun from his hand and dragged him back by his collar. Jonah Crow read the journal aloud to the Rangers, each name echoing like a hammer striking truth into stone. Men who thought they were untouchable, men who would soon face the light. Marigold stood beside Elias, shaking alive free. As the sun rose, she turned to him. "My real name's still Marigold Hart," she said softly. "But if you still want, I'd like to be Marigold Ward." Elias stared at her, throat tight. All his life he'd buried hope before it could hurt him. Now hope stood in front of him, bruised and brave and real. He took her hand. "I'd be honored," he said. Weeks later, Dry Creek Ranch stood quiet again, the barn rebuilt, new fences rising, laughter drifting from the cabin porch. Different sheriff in town, different future, different story. Marigold planted roses beside the door. Elias watched her from the fence line, hat low, heart full. Some nights he still woke thinking of fire and gunshots and the note pinned to her sleeve. But then he'd hear her voice in the kitchen, humming while bread baked, and he'd remember something stronger than fear. Love that survived wolves. Love that faced truth. Love that turned a lonely cowboy into a man who finally had a home, because the note beside her hadn't just threatened them. It had revealed a darkness that needed light. And together, they lit it. The prairie wind still rolled across Dry Creek Ranch, carrying dust and memory and the promise of rain. But now, inside that cabin, laughter lived. And Elias Ward knew something he never believed before. Even in a world full of cruelty, sometimes love rides in on a stagecoach, bleeding, frightened, and brave enough to change everything.